All right. Well, everyone, thanks. Welcome everyone who's here in person and online to the Ninth Ward meeting. A couple of quick announcements about a couple things that are kind of happening in the ward. I don't see anyone from the South Boulevard blocks, but we have some parking changes that we are working through. So I had a couple of residents ask about the kind of the parking crunch they're seeing. We took, and just this is also good informational stuff for other residents. So we had a parking study done where we have parking staff come and take stock of who's parked at different hours during the day. They also track whether or not folks have Evanston vehicle sticker registration. So they can have a good idea of like who's parking in the neighborhood. Is it people from Evanston, outside of Evanston? That data came back, and for the blocks just east of Ridge, kind of to Elmwood. And what we're seeing is at night, up to 40% of people who are parked there are non-Evanston residents based on their registration. So in talking with our parking staff, what we think is happening is folks going to work, they park their car there, or they're parking either, when they're going to transit in the morning or leaving their parked car there overnight. So we're looking into setting that as an Evanston vehicle sticker only zone, which does not incur any additional costs to residents, but you have to have a valid Evanston vehicle sticker registration. And then if you have family members staying, you can get a pack of 10 parking passes for $2. So it's really cheap. So we're trying to be accommodating to residents, and so far the feedback on that solution has been good. So I don't see anyone from that block, but we'll be doing some more outreach, and then we'll be making those changes. And then the other exciting announcement I have is I've been talking to Grace Lutheran Church, and they are interested in potentially selling their parking lot to the city of Evanston in order to have an affordable housing project there. So this is something that we, typically the city keeps our real estate kind of purchases under wraps, but this is a situation where, this is a local religious institution and they're really wanting to sell to us in order to have a project for affordable housing. So it's a little bit different situation. So we are comfortable kind of advertising, and I think it's going to be and so this will be something that is going to spark this discussion around what folks want to see there and what's possible. So it's really exciting, and I think this is like the kind of the first that we're publicly announcing it, and I'm hoping that eventually, either this month or early next month, we'll be discussing it in executive session with the rest of the council. So those are my announcements, and I will quickly pass it over to Lorraine Williams, and she will be, I can do this right, be discussing a awesome new program here. Let's see.
Yep. Well, thank you very much, Juan. Appreciate it. Yeah, this is a little pet project that I started. I was very excited to start working about a year or so ago, I guess. Well, maybe it's been 2 years now. I started working with Juan and with Lauren Ruiz about a couple of different things that I wanted to see for the disabled community in Evanston. One of those projects was the fact that we talked through, and I said that, I go to the grocery store, I go home, I go to work, I go for walks, and in none of those situations do I ever get injured. But when I go to the beach in the summer, I get injured. And I get injured by flying objects because I am legally blind. I have no central vision whatsoever. I've been 2800 vision for most of my life. I started losing my vision when I was about 8 years old. And so I would go to the beach, and because most people can't tell that there's anything going on unless they know what these little flowers are for, which we'll talk about in a minute. So when they, toss a frisbee or they're playing volleyball and something's coming toward me, it really doesn't, they don't think to say, hey, heads up, because I'm looking, it appears that I'm looking right at it, but the object is coming out of nowhere because most of my vision is just a big black circle. So I've gotten hit in the head, the base, the shoulder, the whatever. Never really feels very good. And then some of the interactions after that were sort of disappointing. People coming over to get whatever it was that they just hit me with and saying, don't be mad, or it didn't hit you that hard if I'm rubbing my shoulder, and so we talked, and I emailed Juan, and I talked with Lauren Weiss, and I said, would it be possible maybe to create some areas at the beach where there could be no flying objects, and that way people who are visually impaired or have post-traumatic stress or other reasons, other things going on. And so they were just fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Like 2 emails and 1 conference call, and we had the whole thing set up, and the sandwich boards went up at 2 of the beaches 2 summers ago. And there was a lot of positive feedback. I told Lauren, I said, I think you're going to find that this is going to serve other people than just the disabled community, and or the visually impaired community. And within a week, she called and she said, you don't believe the phone call I just had. I had a mom on the phone thanking me. She was in tears. She said, my daughter has hydrocephalitis and she has to wear a helmet everywhere she goes because if she gets hit in the head, it is a very, very serious thing. Could be her life. And now, and I finished her sentence for a bad East Coast habit I have. I said, now she gets to go to the beach just like all the other kids. She doesn't have to wear her helmet. And she said, yes, that's exactly what she said. And she said she was crying on the phone because of this, So it's a wonderful thing when we make these little adaptations and we then discover the amazing implications that they end up having for people. So we got so much positive feedback for that then this summer they incorporated it on all beaches. So there's the play zone and the please don't throw zone. And I think it's been really great. We've got a lot of good feedback. So then the next thing I decided to broach, the next area I decided to broach was, are there any social activities or social groups for the disabled community that are not monetized? I'm loving the vigor and the creativity that I'm seeing with things that are being offered here at the Creative Center and other community areas within the city, but to say to me, hey, you can come do a crossword puzzle as a group. We'll read the clues and you answer and everything. That'll be $25, please. That's not something that fits in the budget of most people. 95% of all people who are legally blind or blind are unemployed. 95% of all people who are disabled live at or below the poverty level. So I suggested that we try and create something that would be a reciprocity or a gift economy that would run in parallel with the other programs that we do running with some cost associated with them. And so I came up with Dash and Go. I jokingly threw out the name. I had no idea. It wasn't really, but everybody thought it was kind of fun, so we stuck with it. So it's Disabled Adult Social Hour and Gaming Opportunities. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually come together here in this room, and we're going to give it a try to see which days are more appealing to people. We're going to try it on the first Wednesdays of every month from 1 to 2:30, and then we're also going to try it again on the third Tuesdays of every month. See if that fits into people's schedule. This is going to be a peer-run group. People will bring games that they know that they like and they know they're capable of playing and adapting to. We will also have some games here, but there will be no staff. This will be a completely peer-run group. So we're going to be practicing self-governance. We're going to be practicing peer support. We're going to be practicing collaboration. It's like, well, this person has problems holding the cards, but I have problems seeing the cards. So we're going to pair up, and together we're going to be one person playing this game. And we're going to just embrace the paradigm of together we create accessibility. Because the gaming industry has just basically not even tried to make games accessible to the disabled community. There's Braille Monopoly and there's Braille Scrabble, but they're both incredibly expensive. And then the usual reaction when I get to adaptable games is people say, well, there's large print cards and there's large print Uno. And I usually respond to them, I kind of thought Uno was boring when I was 10. I'm a grown woman. I'd really like to play Corporal or Quiddler or Settlers of Catan or Balderdash. I'd really like to have some fun games. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a peer-run group collaboratively figuring out and assessing, okay, what game would we like to play? How do we need to adapt it in order to make it accessible? And then go ahead and implement that by pairing people up. And, we'll see what happens. There might be multiple games going on at once, or we might all do one crossword puzzle together at the same time. So that's what we're doing. It's launching October 1st. I brought some flyers because I kick it old school. It does not have a QR code on it because I take it old school. So I'll leave these here for people if you're interested. I would love it if you know of someone who has, it identifies as somebody who has a disability that's, and they feel socially isolated. They're looking for some way to pair up with the community. This is anybody 18 years of age or older, because I wanted it to be cross-generational and cross-disability. So, there is, especially now with funding sources being treated the way they are, there's everybody run to your corner and collect with your tribe and try and save your piece of the pie. So we're going to try and do things cross-community, cross-generation, and collaboratively as much as possible. So thanks for listening. And put your thinking caps on if you know of anybody who would really benefit from a social opportunity like this. Please let them know. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine.
You're very welcome. Thank
Great.
you.
That also reminds me of the Oasis project that has launched, and they're having a fundraiser here at the Theater Center. They gave a presentation to us at council, and they've raised over $100,000 already. So they're really making strides to really get this off the ground quickly. Transition. Our next speaker.
Yeah, three.
Guys,
do I need to move to be?
I think, let me move let's do the.
So
I think if you, my best stand right here. Should get online, they can see a little bit, but.
hi, folks online, and hello, everyone. What a great group of folks who are so interested in being invested in their community. Thanks a lot for inviting us here. I'm with Metropolitan Family Services. For those who aren't aware, we're a large social service organization in Chicagoland, so we serve about 250,000 people throughout Cook, DuPage, and Lake counties with a diverse set of services, everything from adult protective services, adult training, child care, behavioral health services. I'm the executive director for Howard and Evanston Community Center. We're formerly Howard Area Community Center. So I showed a bunch of folks in this board care about what goes on in Rogers Park. So you hear the name Evanston in our organization, and now we realize about a quarter of our residents or our participants are coming from Evanston. And I think it's important we realize that a lot of our folks who are seeking services don't really recognize that boundary at Howard Street. They're kind of going back and forth. So I'm hoping that we can be a bridge between both municipalities to help folks understand what we're doing and how we engage with residents. So my organization serves about 10,000 people annually. We have, again, we're multi-service. We have everything from adult education, early learning, so Head Start, early Head Start, domestic violence intervention, and counseling. We work with men and women coming home from prison, and we work to get them not only employed, but also to address the assistance factors that go into keeping them from going back to prison. We also, I believe I mentioned English language, but we do have English language classes for immigrants, and I was just at a Protect Evanston Wilmette Skokie meeting yesterday where we're talking about a lot of the things that are going on right now with ICE and how we're protecting our community residents, in particular those coming from the Caribbean and in particular that Haiti. So I just want to kind of bring some visibility to what we do. And I have some cards that I'll leave here with you if you want to pick them up. And then I'll work with Juan in his office to continue to share some of the events that we have coming up. We do have a free open house event to talk about our adult education program. Come visit us. I started off as a volunteer tutor. I'm an Evanston resident in the Third Ward, and it was a really rich and rewarding experience. So people are always asking, how can I be activated? What can I do? I have more than enough things to keep everybody busy. So if you are interested, you're civic minded, you're community minded, understand that we are serving most likely residents from your own community. And we're happy to work with you in different capacities to be a part of the work that we're doing. Do you have any questions at all right now?
Your physical location is?
So we have several. We have our main office is located right at Howard and Polinas, so we're about a half block from the Howard L. We have a family center which primarily services individuals in Rogers Park and Westridge, but we do have some Evanston families that are overflow from the child care services here in Evanston. That's on Ashland and Howard, and then we also have a youth center. And I'm hoping that we can. We're in the process of looking at a new facility also in Rogers Park, but that will expand our youth services. So it's a STEM and STEAM clubhouse, meaning science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And we have our youth doing everything from additive printing, so 3D printing, to computer programming, to gaming, to cosplay. It's a really exciting engaging thing. And in general, we are working with quite a few residents in Chicago, but as I mentioned, we really sat down and looked at our demographics and realized about a quarter of our folks are coming to us. A lot of them are coming from the 8th Ward, but we realized we're serving zip codes across the board. I also want to add in, if you know anybody who is food insecure, we operate a food pantry twice a week. People can come as a client choice pantry. We're going to give the folks 30 pounds of food that they don't want. They come and pick what they want. And then they're able to come in and utilize our pantry multiple times in a month. So we get quite a few folks from the 60202 and 60201 zip codes that are utilizing our pantry services as well. Yeah.
Did this used to be called the Howard
Howard Area
Community Center?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Okay.
And we were independent up until about 2021, and then we joined Metropolitan Family Services. The advantage of being part of such a large network of different centers throughout Cook County, Lake County, and DuPage is if we don't offer the service, we're able to connect them to other sites that do. So if people are having behavioral health challenges, that's not something I offer at my site, but we're easily able to pass them over to there. We have a lot of good partnerships as well with service providers here in Evanston. But I think what sets us apart, one, is our reentry services. This is for men and women coming home from incarceration. And then also just the wraparound supports. We're really trying to address all of the individual's needs, not just pick one and then work with a partner. We're generally able to do as a one-stop shop. Any questions right now? Yeah.
For adult protective services, I work with seniors and occasionally encounter a situation with people with dementia who, you know, needing help.
Yep.
Is there a particular person at your organization that?
Yeah, I'll give you my card and I can connect you. I have a neighbor who right across the hall from me who he's just on the edge of decisional, but we've been working with his daughters. adult protective services will come and investigate those types of issues. The majority of what we do is actually looking at elder abuse, but in cases where an older person is potentially a danger to themselves or others because of physical or mental capacities as they age, we do task folks on this. And our APS unit took over all of what Catholic Charities does, so now Metropolitan is serving all of Lake County and North. Great. Well, I will be here. I'll have some cards, and then in future board newsletters, we'll have more information. We'd love to see you. Just a quick save the date. I would be remiss to say it. We have an open house that gives a showcase of all of our programs. Typically in June, we're looking at the second Thursday in June. I don't expect that. But, pencil it into your calendars. Come and see what we do down in Rogers Park. We're a short distance away, but we are hoping to continue to expand our focus for Evanston and really be a bridge between both Chicago and Evanston, so we can more comprehensively serve the residents who need the support. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
All right. Last but not least, Director Flax. We're here. So over the weekend, we launched Housing for All, which is Evanston's strategic housing plan. And so I had the pleasure of having last night at our housing community development meeting, the representation from staff and also our outside consultants who helped us with kind of this big piece with the data gathering. And we really, in the next month, are going to have a focus on getting a lot of input from residents. And Director Flax is here to kind of walk us through and tell us about the program.
Right, thank you all.
And do you want me to pull up the, here, I'll do the tech support here. Do you want me to put the slides up? For
That would
folks?
be great.
Okay.
I am not going to take you through the housing gap analysis because it's pretty dense and pretty hard to follow this one. But I want to let you know that on the website, find out anything about this housing plan. If you just go to cityofevanston.org/housing for all, and it is housing for all, but for all together, you will be able to find all these things and more, because that is also clear. There is a form that you can fill out to provide your input. An important thing to realize about this plan, did this with the comprehensive plan grant. It is a draft. And it is a draft because one of the purposes of being a draft is to get input from our community to finalize the plan. So we have probably more potential specific strategies than we might ultimately have in the plan as we figure out which ones are likely to be most effective and all those good things that are things that make a plan not something that goes on a shelf, but something that actually influences and guides decisions. So, and I had made a short version, but then I managed to not send it right before at least I sent it properly. We had a power outage in the city today, which kind of made a bunch of interesting things. So if I can use this, right? To move to slides.
I've not used that one, but you can try it.
Let me try.
You might start the Netflix if you don't want that to happen. Here, I'll man this here.
So we've got all these different little boxes here. What is housing for all? And as I said, the housing gap analysis. And when you get on just to give you an idea of what's in the housing gap analysis, because as I say, I'm not going to take you through all this. It's really, really a lot of detail. And its purpose is what's really important is it measures the extent to which Evanston's current housing system matches households' ability to pay at today's prices, okay? So what we're looking at, you know how you keep hearing and probably feeling in some cases how the cost of housing is rising really much faster than income. So that is, we're seeing more and more of a mismatch in those budgets for housing and the kind of housing that is available. This is a problem. It's going to affect our community and it's going to create change of kinds that I don't think we want. So that's the key thing we are looking at. How does the supply not meet the need? Okay. And there are details of all different kinds. I'm going to give you a few of the primary findings because they're kind of scary sometimes. Citywide, approximately 48% of renter and 24% of owner households are cost burdened across our entire income range. Now, cost burden is a term that you'll hear more and more in the world of housing. And it's a statistical metric. If a household spends 30% or more of their gross income, their gross annual income on housing costs, and it's not just your rent or your mortgage, it's, rent, utilities, if it's a house, it's the, PITI, principal interest tax, and interest and insurance, but also, other costs. So it's really a holistic. If you're spending that much or more, you're spending too much of your income on only your housing, which leaves you not enough money. If you get to spending 50% or more of your income on housing, then you are considered severely housing cost burden. So those are the kind of metrics that are used in the housing analysis industry. And so when you think about almost 50% of renters and 25% of homeowners, that's a pretty disturbing percentage that are cost burden. Overall, Evanston has a housing affordability gap of approximately 11,000 units. So that means there are a lot of households that can't find housing that fits their needs and budget. Roughly 7,000 of that would be rental based on rental, and for 44,000 would be owner units. The largest gaps occur for renter households making less than 80% of the area median income. Another thing our federal government does is they calculate median income by county. And so we are part of Cook County, so we have Cook County.
Actually, they do it by zip code.
That's a different thing. I'll talk about that. That's the small area rents. That isn't the overall. That's okay. That just gives people who have housing choice vouchers the ability to get some rents here because their vouchers have a higher value in higher cost housing markets. So that's to our advantage. But that isn't the area median income. That's an accommodation because our housing costs are so high. Anyway, sorry about that. That's a little bit even more in the weeds. But and the median income is adjusted based on the number of people in a household because obviously that's a factor in what they can afford by the housing. Historically, the federal government's money has been focused on households at or below 80% of the area median because that is generally the population that has more challenges finding a housing they can afford. So that is not surprising. But what is surprising is how it's creeping into higher income households that is really making our market less affordable to more people. Same thing with ownership households. The largest gap in owner-occupied housing occurs at the lowest income levels. There is a gap of more than 3,000 owner units attainable that there's a gap of more than 3,000 owner units attainable by households making less than $95,000 of annual income. So of the population at that income level, there would be at least 3,000 that could not find a house that could afford it. And that, when we say house, that could be condo. We're not necessarily saying single family house either. Okay.
To clarify,
Pardon?
just when you say 3,000, do you mean 3,000 people or 3,000
Households. Households.
Thank you.
In this case, we're always talking households.
Thank you.
So gaps are expected to narrow. These are projections by 2035 due to rising incomes and ongoing reductions in cost burdens for low-income households. But in our organization that did this analysis, Development Planning Partners, this is their wheelhouse. They analyze the real estate market for various things. And those reductions, they've calculated what they expect is going to be happening over our 10-year plan period. So these numbers are specifically designed for our plan period. But by 2035, which will be our 10-year period, we expect to still see a gap across the income range of more than 8,350 housing units. So we might make some progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'm going to get into a little bit more about the specific plan, but if you want to see the data on which this plan is based, this is the document, which is on that web page, and you will see descriptions of a lot of different things by population segment, the affordable housing that's available is here, the differences which are quite dramatic in household income and housing affordability by race and ethnicity. We just said the median household income overall is $95,766. For the white households alone, for white alone is households, the median household income is almost $120,000. For Black or African American households, it's $56,000. So we know we have a pretty dramatic difference in incomes. So
I'll just jump in. I want to just share something. So the gap analysis, super interesting. One of the things to keep in mind, it's all by census data. So if you look for Ninth Ward is not there. There's 3 census tracts that basically cover the Ninth Ward.
Yep.
A lot of it, there's some things that surprised me in the data, but a lot of it was things that I already knew were happening. So I think for me, and when we're talking about our housing and kind of what our community's like and the way it's trending, one of the biggest takeaways for me was like the Black population has been decreasing over the past 20 years. And, anecdotally, when you talk to people, working class folks, if you know a lot of working class folks, especially people who rent, it's like, it is hard to be here. And the data really kind of bears that out, that we do have a huge gap in affordability. Other really interesting thing I'll just share was something I've only learned about in the last like year or so is market friction. And so there's this idea that, and this kind of bears out anecdotally, like if you know people, for sure know someone who's in an apartment that they're not in love with, but it's the one they could find, maybe it's too small, and they stay in that apartment because they can't find something that really fits their needs. If we had enough of housing across all ranges, they could find something that is more accommodating for their family or household, and that frees, the smaller apartment might be fine for, someone who needs 2 bedrooms. So there is I hate using the word trickle down, but this is like an actual situation where resources do trickle down to the people who need them if there are enough housing units to accommodate people. And the other big gap that we saw was for seniors, because there's a lot of folks who are aging in place and would love to maybe have a condo instead of a home. And, you know, that the lack of affordable senior housing also coupled with interest rates have kind of, it basically sticks people where it's not the most ideal fit for their housing. And so,
They stay put.
yeah, they stay put. And so it was interesting to see that that was in the data and kind of
Yes.
justified the things that you kind of think, I think this is happening. So
The other
Yeah.
thing that happens is sometimes when you look at the American Community Survey data, which is where the, you know, how much people are paying for their housing comes from. Those are people who are living in Evanston right now. And the longer you've been in a place and not moved generally, the less likely you are to be housing cost burden because, you know, you might be staying in a place that, and you're, that isn't ideal, but you can't find any place else. And the other thing is, if you're renting and you're a good tenant, your landlord is less likely to raise your rent as much. That's just because they want to keep good tenants. So the cost for somebody who's been living someplace for a long time tends to be lower than, substantially lower than somebody trying to get into the market. So that's another factor. It's also, look at the cost of housing, you know, I mean, the people who bought years ago, or even not all that many years ago, people who bought before mortgage rates went up don't want to leave because they don't want to lose that low mortgage. So there's so many different factors, and Councilmember Harkins is correct. Those aren't talked about. We talk about lack of availability, but it's also, it's not just that units aren't available, it's that people don't necessarily have options to get other things. So that is important. So housing for all is because we're really looking at across the income spectrum. That doesn't mean we will necessarily financially assist everyone. That would make sense. But it means we have to look at the entire community to be able to fix our housing and resident mismatch. It's a 10-year horizon. We assess our needs, and this document helps do a lot of that. Establish our priorities, and then focus on taking action. So, what is this plan really? It is not a cure-all. Gosh, I wish there was a silver bullet, but there just isn't. We know we need new housing, but we're not going to get it poof, you know, just by saying we need it and we've got a plan. It's not an audit of every current initiative that we're working on, but it also isn't going to be a dusty old plan that gets put on a shelf. And is the end of the process. It's designed to be our North Star. This is going to guide us as we try to address our housing, or as we address our housing issues, help us create new housing, catalog our current initiatives, and all of this is going to be embedded in our decision making. This plan is an important first step. We started a while ago, and then other things basically took precedence, but now we're here. We've done our draft release, and we are going to have community input, and then ultimately the Housing and Community Development Committee will vote to send it on to council for approval. So in June, we went to the committee, a little bit of background information. We had some preliminary feedback from the community. Here's our draft. Back in 2024, then we had a gap. Then we did a city council refresh in June of this year and a HCDC refresh. HCDC is Housing Community Development Committee. We speak into the acronym, sorry. Bottom line, Evanston residents face acute housing challenges. Can't find the housing we need. Our housing challenges are pretty major, so we've got to really address them, and it's going to take bold action. We need to prioritize value over volume or just quantity. In other words, we need to focus on who needs the help and most, and figure out what is going to be most effective in helping them. It's real easy because there are a gazillion strategies to sort of splatter your money around and not really accomplish something. So part of the role of reason we're coming out with a draft is to get input to help us narrow and focus our plan. City can't do it alone. We have partners already in our community, and we need to find more partners. And it ranges from other public groups like the Housing Authority of Cook County to Community Partners for Affordable Housing to Reba Development Corporation, many, many, many partners that we need to expand. And we can't pay for it alone. And we are facing a challenge, as probably most of you know. The federal government is making a lot of decisions about where to put money that don't necessarily support the goals that we have. But Evanston's racial and economic diversity is what's at risk. We are losing populations, and also we ultimately will lose lower income people if they cannot afford to live here. So we've got a bunch of strategies to include to spark discussion in our community. Feedback and recommendations will provide greater focus to this plan. Additional detail will be added. And so the draft plan on that website, it's actually in color. It looks like this, all kinds of different housing, and it's 82 pages long right now. More detail will be added and focused as we get our strategies focused, is what I'm saying. And then in some cases, even though community development is launching the plan, different departments within the city also help implement it. For example, probably some of you know, or many of you know, that our human services department provides general assistance. Well, that's a kind of housing assistance. So there are many, many ways different departments contribute to this. Okay. Our vision, we will strive to provide a variety of housing options that are accessible. Accessibility is very important, and it is a lot of different aspects to accessibility that we don't always consider. Attainable, when we say attainable, it's like, yeah, I can afford it. Connected, equitable, healthy, integrated, safe, and stable. There was a study that came out recently, they continue to come out, that poor housing, poor quality housing, or frequent moves because of lack of stable housing has devastating effect on children growing up, on their educational attainment, their mental and emotional stability, lots of things that it affects. So I talked a little bit about this already. What about how do we define housing affordability? Here's that 30% of gross income that is, don't want to have to pay more than that. And the cost burden is when you're paying above that, severe cost burden if it's at 50%. And this talks a little bit about how the area median income, but I kind of covered that, how it's defined. Okay, household income. Because we have to look at different segments of our population and try to figure out how to categorize them, we are using standard area median incomes that the federal government uses to kind of define the needs. Extremely low is people whose income is under 30% of area median. Very low is between that and 50%. And by the way, you probably all have heard about Section 8 housing or housing choice vouchers, which are Section 8 subsidies that go with the household to rent an apartment. Those eligibility for that is 50% or below. So that gives you kind of an idea of what that means. Low, 50 to 80%. Middle, this was a group that was defined after the mortgage foreclosure crisis when a lot of people lost their housing. that 80 to 120%, upper middle, 120 to 150%, and higher income, 150% and above. So there's income brackets, and then there's also a housing continuum. Who do we need to house and how? And what do we need to provide? Well, everything from homeless services, which is a combination of social services, but also can be housing subsidies, emergency shelters. There's another part of that, transitional housing, people coming from some kind of situation. Actually, that's one of the things where you have people who had been incarcerated, that sort of thing, coming out. This is one of the examples of a tool that helps them. Supportive housing, people with chronic disabilities need ongoing supports. Community or social housing, public housing fits into that, but there are other models that we want to look to expand, like limited equity cooperatives. We'll talk more about that. Then there's below rental and ownership cost housing, things like the geometry and construction house that was just moved in the Ninth Ward on Monday.
Yeah.
I was going to say last Monday. No, it was this Monday. It's an example of that. That house is, the land it's on is in Community Partners for Affordable Housing's land trust. The land value is separated from the house. The house is sold to an income eligible household. They have to be at or below 120% of area median. And if and when they sell, they get a share of the equity, and part of it remains with the house to maintain it as affordable. So Community Partners for Affordable Housing can then sell it to another income eligible household. And that's a way of preserving its affordability in perpetuity. Private rental and home ownership. Those are just getting up to market rate. So but that's the continuum we need to look
Can I
at.
just say something?
Sure.
Supported, go back to the slide. When you define supportive,
Uh-huh.
once you're over 65, supportive housing is also for seniors.
Yes,
Not
that is
people
absolutely
with-
true.
Chronic, ongoing.
Yes. No, I was talking
disability.
about what they call permanent support housing, which
Yeah.
is different from
But I
supportive
think a lot
housing.
of people
Yes,
don't,
make that
I
distinction.
mean, it's
Thank you.
with the percentage of our seniors.
Yes.
that we have.
And actually, there's a huge gap. Much of our subsidized senior housing almost functions like affordable assisted living without the assistance, because that's a huge gap. That is an enormous gap. All right. So key takeaways. Our city's economic and racial diversity is at risk. The fact the Black population has declined significantly. And Anniston still is overall a diverse community, but we're pretty segregated by neighborhood. Talked about the cost burden on renters. Steep barriers to home ownership. I hear a lot from realtors, we need something under $500,000. Yeah. The senior population is growing and has diverse needs that are not being met. And college students have diverse needs that aren't necessarily met. Draft goals. We're proposing these goals as ways that we're then going to determine, are we succeeding with our housing plan? And the first one we listed is reducing the cost burden. If we can reduce the portion of our population that is cost burden, that could be a measure of success. How many units we preserve or create as affordable? Are we maintaining economic diversity? We'll be able to look at Census American Community Survey information on income, what's happening to our racial and ethnic mix, and also looking at household income, race, net worth, and variation by census tract as a way of looking at how we reduce the segregation. Oh, Linda, what?
My question is about the difference between preserving and creating. Do you
Okay,
have a
we'll
breakdown of?
We'll get to that more, because we'll talk about in the strategies what preserving is. We'll get to that. Okay.
But do you have a breakout?
No, not at this point. We're not doing any of that detail until we get farther and define strategies, because we would put a whole lot of work into something that we might then abandon. So, okay. Okay. Secondary, but still important. Increase long-term affordability. That land trust method was one way of doing that. There are some others. Because otherwise you subsidize, your subsidy benefits one household, and then once they're no longer there, starting over again.
But it's important to note that you put something in a land trust, they don't pay taxes on the land. Is that correct?
No,
No.
they do pay taxes. It's
It's reduced.
it's
They
reduced.
don't pay it on the land. So, yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So-
Well, no, yeah, we have the SIPO.
So
Yes.
who pays, does the land
Yes.
get taxed?
No, the land is
Okay.
not, you're right.
yeah.
It's, the land is
So-
owned by the nonprofit. in a
So
trust.
So, and typically the land is from a half to 60% of the value of the home,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So
No, actually it isn't. That is not
a
true.
third?
No, the way it's taxed in this country is the bulk of the tax value is the building. Yeah, because what happens when somebody has,
Well, is it quantified? Was there a measure? Is it 10%, 15%, 11%?
I don't have the rate, but Cook County has a tax rate for it. You can look it up on the Cook County Assessor's website.
Well,
Because they have different tax rates, for
I-
example.
I understand, and just
But I don't know
a
it
rough
off the top of
calculation
my
of my
head.
own taxes, that's,
Yeah.
it's about 50%, between 33 and 50%. That's, maybe I'm wrong, but I have looked at my own taxes, and what land trusts say to me is that the only savings that are being cured are those on the taxpayers who are curing. Okay, that's, to me, one of the things about land trusts that has to be mentioned is that really the savings are settled to the taxpayers. They're paying for that difference.
Where you
Agreed?
say the taxpayer, yeah,
It's,
it's,
I think it's one of them, and I can work with SEPA to get an exact number,
breakout. Mhm.
but it is, especially when you look at all of our, when we do like subsidies for like general assistance, when we're trying to stop people from being homeless,
Homeless.
the costs that the city is foregoing by having this in a land trust is a lot cheaper than it costs us to even do general assistance for someone.
On a
And we could, on a per
basis,
household
yes.
basis, it's probably like $1 per
Is that,
person,
is that just the city, or are we talking about all the other taxing systems?
probably the city, but yeah. But I can get all those, if you want those numbers, we can get those for you.
But it affects all the other taxing bodies because of the way
Yeah.
the cost is spread. I mean, that's how the taxes are assessed. Okay. Another important aspect is reducing homelessness. Also looking at our spend, how much we spend per unit or household helped. And also another important thing in affordable housing is how much other outside funding we leverage, because as we said, we can't do it alone with our resources. There are things like the low income housing tax credit program, which is the largest single source of affordable funding for affordable housing right now. We have 2 LIHTC projects that are going to be underway shortly in Evanston. One is a 60-unit project over on South Boulevard, east of the CTA and Metro. And then we have another one at the corner of, near the corner of Church and Narrows. So those are LIHTC projects. And because we have some affordable housing fund and home money that will be put into that helps them get funded from the Illinois Housing Development Authority, because that shows that A, that there's support for affordable housing, and B, it's that the Illinois Housing Development Authority has more money to give out in more places because there's help in the community and support for it. Okay, so that's leveraging resources and increasing partnerships. All of these things are things we gotta do. There are a lot of uncertainties because of all the uncertainties with funding. We have three primary objectives: preserve affordable housing units. We'll get into how some of those things are when we get to the strategies. Create new housing units that address the existing gaps in our housing needs, and protect residents from displacement, because that's an important way to keep us from losing our Black and other populations that we hold dear to, part of being what makes us Evanston. So I'm going to give you an example. So strategy 3.7, explore local hospital housing investment partnership. So get a new partnership. What would be the target? Households with incomes less than 30% of the area median. And what do we need to do? We need to either protect or create this. So that's one example of how we have to look at things. Now, when we say a local housing investment partnership, what might that be? There are hospitals that actually have invested in housing for housing for the people who are the most often in the emergency rooms. Now, there's a selfish interest for them because that's very high cost to them, but there's also a benefit to them because they want their patients to get well. One of the biggest problems is when you have people who are in and out of the emergency room, they usually are very unstably housed, and they never really can recover from conditions that continue to be perpetuated by lack of housing or by not good housing. So University of Illinois Hospital has one of those programs. That's one strategy. So these are other preservation strategies. Let me just keep going a little more. This, okay? Extend the affordability periods of subsidized affordable housing. A lot of housing that is affordable has it for a specific period. And if we can extend those, then that will preserve affordable housing. Sustain existing naturally occurring affordable housing. Acronym NOAH. We have it's generally rental that this falls into this, but the largest supply of rental in all of Cook County is in buildings like 6 units or less. And many of them are owned by small landlords, 1 to 2 unit properties, and they are rented at more reasonable rates. When they build new high rises, the cost of those units are going to be much more. But this naturally affordable housing is what Evanston has historically had quite a bit of. We want to establish a one-stop shop of housing rehab programs. There are a bunch of different housing rehab programs, and if people need help, finding the right one is kind of a challenge. We need to make it easier.
I'll add something. One of the interesting pieces of data is that there's a significant amount of homeowners that are energy cost burdened.
Yeah.
So if you think of, someone who has been in their home a long time and probably have an old furnace, no insulation, those costs are significant, and that, who has, 20 grand to put solar panels on your house.
Right.
And so that was an interesting piece of data that I think that's the interesting strategy to help people.
Expand shared equity home ownership models. We talked a bit about the land trust. There is another one that has not been in use in this country much for quite a while, and that's shared equity cooperatives. And those are structured in a way. There is a shared equity cooperative in Evanston. It is Reba's. Why can't I think of the name of it? Anyway, it's a 12 unit.
So the House of
House of Peace, yes, which is a shared equity cooperative. People buy ownership shares like they do in a regular cooperative, but again, it's restricted to people of a certain income level. And another important thing is there is an institution, an organization that's very different that helps support them, like a REBA, as opposed to just a general, it's not like having a condominium association. You've got more support. Okay. Another really important one is establishing an acquisition and preservation fund. And that's to provide the resources to do all these things. Preserve. How do we preserve affordable housing? One thing is to get more money, to give us the ability to. But there are things that we want to look at to do that, ways to do that. Marin County, California. I don't think it's so much an impact fee. That's kind of a different, but it has, if a property is built, they have a 2,000 square foot is kind of the standard. If you build that, something that's larger than that, or the square footage over that size, over those 2,000, they pay a little extra fee. And that fee gets put into very well into the affordable housing fund. So it's a small way of getting it. So it's sort of like a luxury, as you could say, but it's a way of generating money for affordable housing. Anti-deconversion. A lot of two flats get deconverted to single family. That's been happening in Chicago a lot. We've seen quite a bit. Well, we haven't seen as much in Evanston necessarily, but it's an ongoing challenge. When you deconvert 2 units to make one, you've got one more expensive unit, and you've got fewer housing units, and it's more expensive. Explore the creation of the transfer of development rights. This happens in some cities. You can get development rights from a nearby property that allow you to build something different. And support policies for adaptive reuse. We've done some really exciting adaptive reuse projects in Evanston, and all of them, the recent ones, have inclusionary housing units in it. The Messiah Temple is one, the Varsity Theater is another, and Sojourner Church is a third. And those were all properties that had totally different uses that have been converted to housing. Okay. Redevelop city-owned properties. You might have heard about putting assets to work. That's a way of getting city assets that are not being used to the best benefit of our community into different uses. And the lot 1, parking lot on South Boulevard, where that 60-unit housing, affordable housing development is being built, is an example of that. In essence, the city is giving the land to the developer at a much reduced cost, and that helps the affordability. Partner with religious institutions. Councilmember Hutter-Price just talked about an opportunity we're looking at. Develop an accessory dwelling unit financing and technical assistance program. We've made it legal to build an accessory dwelling unit on any residential lot subject to lot coverage and impermeable surface. So there's always constraints on, you can't just build everything. You can't build lot line to lot line. But there are a lot of hurdles. It's kind of expensive. It can be quite expensive if you're doing a standalone one. And it's also hard to figure out some of the regulations. So we've got to make it easier for people to do that. Strengthen the inclusionary housing ordinance to maximize affordable unit creation. And that we have to be aware, subject to what's going on in the marketplace as well. Okay. This is something that will be an outcome of the comprehensive plan when it's approved. Update the zoning code to facilitate housing development and allow different housing types. In Evanston and many other parts of the country, we really restrict what you can build on property in zoning districts. We have R1 and R2. Technically, you can build one primary structure on those lots, and now one ADU, subject to what I already talked about. But when you look at the older parts of town, and parts of the ninth ward, you've got a eclectic mix of housing, which meets different people's needs um, in the same neighborhood. And that's one of the ways you can also get that integration of different incomes. Streamline the entitlement and permitting process. We can always improve processes of the city and explore employer-assisted housing programs. And that can be individual, large entities, or it could be maybe trying to set something up that could help all of the downtown businesses that are trying to make it possible for the people who work there to live in Evanston. Strategies to protect people. Expand fair housing education and enforcement. There are still discriminatory practices. Establish a housing provider mitigation fund. We have housing providers who are not willing to take on somebody who has a voucher, which technically they can't deny because that is a source of income discrimination. But it's really easy to get around that by using things like really high credit scores. Oh, not looking at anything about you, but you don't have a credit score of 750. Wow, you don't meet our criteria. Create an asset building and financial counseling program. That helps everybody not only get into better housing, but maintain it. And that's really important. Update the building code to reduce the cost of construction. There are things that have been looked at and implemented in a number of cities in this country and in Europe. Right now, in any kind of larger housing structure, you have to have 2 major stairways, and there's this whole thing to access and egress for safety. But in reality, it means you use a lot of space for areas that aren't really needed because it's been quite proven that these places aren't that dangerous. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at different types of building materials that we can encourage. There are new ways of making timber that is very, very strong. I mean, in other words, this is manufactured product, but it's wood that can replace steel, which can make it cheaper to build buildings. Those are the types of things we're really looking at. And we also want to expand the impact of our rent registration program. Other ways to protect, diversify and expand anti-displacement funding sources. How can we help people who are struggling to stay in Evanston? Explore things like the local housing investment partnership, those types of partnerships. Explore a just cause eviction and non-renewal requirement in our landlord-tenant ordinance. Explore expanding rental assistance. There are times rental assistance is the best way to address an immediate problem. Get people into housing, then you have to figure out how to keep them there. So it isn't necessarily long-term. And improve promotion of our current city and partner resources. That's something we can always do better. So
Can I ask a question in your long list of stuff?
Hmm?
I wanted to ask about, could you explain what the hospital partnership was earlier on? I know.
yeah, it's the hospitals invest in housing for people who are regular users of their emergency rooms. It's a way of, most of these are people who have chronic health issues, largely due to not being stably housed. So it is, how you've probably heard that it is less expensive to keep people in housing than it is to, when they fall out of housing, get them back into it. It's a way of getting people whose living conditions make their health issues worse. If they're in a healthier home, that helps overcome that. And so the hospitals are generally providing services much more easily and in ways that help.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not workforce housing, it's emergency room.
Yeah, and that's one example of a partnership. That's not, but that is one that is being done. Yeah.
And then I had another question about the housing provider mitigation fund. What is the fund for? What's the?
That helps landlords who might not be willing to take what they could perceive as higher risk tenants. So it could be things like, okay, what happens if a tenant damages my property with a voucher damages my property? Well, okay, you could get some assistance on that. Now, one of the interesting things about this, San Diego was one of the places that has a housing mitigation fund. It is not used very often, but it can really help.
Right,
Landlords
it's
be
like a
willing
risk
to-
reduction.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's kind of like an insurance.
Because there is not supposed to be discrimination of income, source of income.
But it
It's
happens.
there are ways around
very
that.
real.
And so I think more people, it's just a safeguard. Yeah.
And the last question is, what is the Affordable Housing Investment Partnership?
The partnership, we're just saying we need to get
Get
partners to
partnerships.
invest in affordable housing.
Okay, it's not an existing thing.
It's not an existing thing, no. It's to expand our resources by partnering with others. Okay, so implementation. We don't do anything, it's gonna get worse. That's pretty obvious. So this is a 10-year vision, but we need to focus now on the implementation steps that will really be for the next 5 years for most, because those are the ones that we can understand and address. And it's going to change over time, and we have to be aware of that. So if you go online to the Housing for All website, you will find this QR code that hopefully, after we plan and have input for us, you will give us input. Now, the questions are very, tied to what I just talked to you. There will be very specific questions on like some of those bullet points. How do you feel about these things? So we really are trying to get feedback on what people see as most needed and what they see as most effective. And there are also paper forms that can be picked up at all of our community, at all these locations, picked up and dropped off at the same one or different ones. And so that's another way of getting feedback. We're also doing more community outreach and engagement. So that'll be going on for a while, but we're going back to the Housing and Community Development Committee on October 1st with the feedback from this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, if anyone has any ideas of programs they'd like to see that aren't on there, please share. Because I think we had at the first, our framework draft in the spring was like, there were like 70. I mean, there's
a whole bunch.
Yeah, and so like, unfortunately, there's not a
Now
silver
we're
bullet,
down
you
to
just
like
do this.
27 or
Yeah.
something like that.
But please, share feedback and also share feedback about, what gaps, I think,
Right.
what
So
gaps are the most
this
important and
That's
Yeah.
first take on what we need to do based on this, okay?
Yep.
But we want feedback. All right.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
So 10 years ago, you may remember.
Oh, yeah.
The age program.
We've been having tests a long time.
So 10 years ago, after 2 years of our information gathering and how the recommendations relates.
Yes.
Was any of that incorporated into this?
The need is there.
Well, not the need,
No.
but all the studies.
Yeah, and there's evaluation of senior needs yes. And well, it is things like we said, seniors are in some cases staying in homes that are way more than they need because they don't have any place else to go. Most seniors are looking for the seniors living.
Well, that was the other thing in that, when you talked about the zoning and the ADUs, is we have the branches, but they're all going up higher. So it's still remaining a single story home. We're losing those and we're getting $800,000
Well, and that's
2-story houses.
and and I think one of the things, I like the the idea of preserving like naturally affordable housing, and you can have policies to like incentivize and protect. I know like this summer, I went to a conference and I talked to the alderperson for Humboldt Park, and they have a huge gentrification problem. But they, really rapidly, people, a lot of calls, are you sell your house? They raise their demolition fee like $100,000, which discourages people from. So you want for me, it's like, what do we do to protect the things that we want to keep around? So like, I know.
Take that 100,000 and then renovate that ranch and have it be a good, solid, usable portal.
Or
The problem in Humboldt Park has been going on since for 35 years.
Yeah.
Okay. The question I always have, like, I didn't see one number, one percentage of, something that somebody who's just interested in just how much what our intentions are, how much are we going to spend? What is this going to look like? Okay, in all of the permutations. I never see that. I never see like, you say, today I looked up I looked at your statistics and you said that the average median income was $25,000 for the city of Evanston. And you said, no, it's Cook County. Okay. But I looked it up and it was 16.5 just today. Same thing with the median income. It was 62,000. So what I'm asking you is that can a woman who works for the telephone company and a man who, I don't know, shovels coal as another job, can they live in Evanston?
Right now,
And
it's really hard.
Okay, but it's always been hard to live in Evanston, hasn't it?
I think the data has shown that it's been.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, are you trying to close a gap that may have existed forever? I'm just asking the question, because to me, with all what I'm seeing, there's not a single thing that says, hey, it's this much, it's these people, it's this percentage of income. I have to come back rhetorically and say, hey, it's always been hard. The median incomes sort of say that, it's possible that, certainly there are cheaper alternatives. Okay. And just like Humboldt Park, it's hard all over.
It's hard anyway.
Yeah.
Just because the problems existed for a very, very time.
Oh, that's
We
wonderful
don't
sophistry.
have-
I've heard that.
It
a
does
lot.
not mean we don't know social responsibility.
But.
And I think all you have to do is look at the restaurants that are opening in downtown Evanston to see how severely the demographic has changed. From when I moved in 20 years ago to now, there were no $200 a plate restaurants in Evanston because the demographic wasn't here to support that.
But I also
And you
see
that shift.
But
You
I
know
also
that they
see,
know that there's
but I
people
also
there that will
see
do that.
incredible diversity in my ward. Okay, so is that the shift that I'm supposed to be against? Meaning, like, you see what I'm saying is that I don't, all I can say is that I just want to know, okay, who I'm helping, what their incomes are, and what I would consider to be the very basic things, because from what I see here, in they're just words, there's no forwarding of specifics of plans. Is it attainable? Is it right? And to me, I'm like, hey, just come up with one thing that I can say, yeah, this is for me. Because when I hear that somehow our diversity is challenged, I'm like, that doesn't, I don't see that. When I see Chicago Avenue and downtown with skyscrapers, I don't see a lack of housing. Okay, I see demand that is driving up the price. Okay, but then I ask myself, well, hey, how am I I can't mitigate that. I can't mitigate the fact, that we live in a desirable community with good schools and blah, 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 right? So you've got, my problem is that you just are not telling me what it's gonna cost and who we're going to help.
Well, and this is
So-
because it's a draft.
Well, and so
We'll get to that.
we are, I think, incredibly lucky to live in the ninth ward because when you dig into the data, like we are the socioeconomically and racially diverse neighborhood that people think of, like I just stumbled upon our house in 2007 when we moved up here. You know, I just like, I want to land somewhere in Evanston and I just got lucky. Looking back, you know, if I were 30 years old making the same income I was making then, if I was 30 years old now, I would not be able to afford to live here. I'd be in a Western burb or else I'd be in the city trying to figure out where my kid goes to high school because it's super complicated. So I'm like super fortunate. But I do see, and this really became like front and center to me when my kids started going to school and you meet all your neighbors and like the struggle that folks that are working blue collar jobs to like find, or like single parents, like I always marvel like how, you know, they find an apartment like, and I've had friends who have moved from Evanston. So I know like anecdotally, I know that displacement is happening. And so I think for me, you know, the data, when you dig into it about like our ward, especially, I want to see that integration everywhere. And like, I want to like protect what we have here. And so, you know, this is like Sarah said, this is a draft. So like, depending on what we decide to tackle, some of these things actually don't have any cost. It's policy. There's going to be, I think, next board meeting, I'm going to have the putting assets to work folks here. And that's going to be another opportunity to, you know, advocate for what you want to see at certain sites. And like, if we as a community decide that, hey, we think it's important to help seniors aging in place, let's do affordable senior housing. Let's do workforce housing. Let's do housing focused on, you know, young families. That's the type of stuff that I think once we figure out what we want to put our efforts and, you know, our assets behind.
So you talk about your own experience as a 30-year-old, right? And that you say you now cannot, you don't, you're priced out of that. That's,
If I'd be 30 years old now.
yeah, okay. And you talk about your neighbors who are who say that they spend sometimes too much to live in their homes in Evanston. Is there anything that you would do for yourself or those neighbors in that plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're living here.
Yeah.
What would you
Let
do?
me
Is
give you
it
an
tax?
example.
Is it, no, I'm asking because it seems to me like you're not talking about me. What would you do for those neighbors that is in the plan specifically
To help.
to help them with their monthly mortgage, their taxes, because they're here, they're already here, they're established here in Evanston.
Like for renters, I think we need more housing that's attainable for people who aren't affluent. And so figuring out where to either like, I wish we'd putting assets to work. I wish we'd be building stuff right now, but like the city has like empty parking lots like that. Should have housing there. Like that should happen as quick as possible. Like,
Okay, so you
But then-
haven't
so-
answered the question.
No, but I would-
People
it's
asking,
like we have
saying
to-
that
What does
You
that
would
do to
give-
the people who are already here?
saying that
who
you
are
would
in
give-
cities?
Just give me a second here. Saying that you would give your neighbors,
Monopolizing the conversation, I actually was inside and it's helping me make it.
well, I apologize, but
I don't think
saying to your neighbors that you would give other people apartments is not helping your neighbors.
It would help me. I would have more options in apartments. My apartment is too small right now for my family and we're housing burdened. We pay over
Okay.
30%. And there are 4 of us in a 2-bedroom.
So you've taken advantage of every You're taking advantage of every program that you can.
Don't qualify because your
Don't
income.
qualify. Okay, so we're creating a bunch of places that people who are above the median income will qualify for apartments. Is that correct?
Well, no,
Is that part of the plan?
Now,
Yeah.
let me give you an example. If we allow small apartment buildings to be built in more places, and even for really big homes to be divided into different units, that gives you more affordable housing right there. Okay, so people who are housing cost burdened and don't have a size of unit they need might be able to find something. If we say, wow, there's almost no place that you can build row houses in Madison based on our zoning. Row houses are much less expensive because you put more of them on less land. And you also have, for seniors, for example, you might have shared housing, you might have townhomes. There are all sorts of things that are more efficient use of land and also give different housing types. So seniors who are staying in their big house might go, wow, I can age in place in Evanston in this cool little cottage or something like that, or in an ADU, or any number of things. So those aren't things that we will directly subsidize necessarily, but if we change our zoning, there's a possibility we can make housing that is appealing to people, and there are changes in interest in the housing supply. My children are not anywhere near as interested in having a large lot that they have to either take care of themselves or hire somebody to take care of, because it's costly. They want to have a certain amount of space and things like that, but they don't necessarily want all of that responsibility of yard care and things like that. That's driving greater interest in smaller lots, which we don't allow. Technically, although we have millions of them, well, not millions. R1 zone, for example, our most prescriptive zone, minimum lot size, 7,200 square feet. That's a pretty big lot. In our R1 zone, 49% of the parcels are not conforming with the requirement because our zoning was applied on already built environments. You're not supposed to have a lot with less than 35 feet, R1 or R2. If you go into parts of the 5th ward, they're all 25-foot lots, just like Chicago. So they're legal non-conforming. But you see, we restrained what people can do in ways that have zoned more affordable housing types out of existence.
I think there's a disparity that's not being addressed, and that is you're seeing that people are being squeezed, existing residents are being squeezed out of their properties because of rising costs, and therefore they're getting to the point where all of a sudden it's 30%, then it's 40%, then it's 50%, they're not, it's 50% of their income. And but the programs that appear to be in existence already seem to not be taking that into consideration, because the programs for, say, reduced taxi fares for people, I mean, it just always cracks me up when people say, oh, well, you have a disability. Oh, well, but so it must be really great that you have Lyft and Uber. I was like, it costs $22 to get a ride from Lyft, just to get from this ward up to Central Street, because there is no bus that goes directly to there. You got to go into Spoke and then out on the wheel. And it's like, so there are existing programs that appear to be, their essence seems to be, let's help people who are here not get squeezed out of their properties. But the income caps that are set for those programs are too high for you to actually be part of them. So there just doesn't seem to be a recognition of the fact that there's a disparity between the fact that you're offering programs to help people not get squeezed out of their homes, but the income level that's required that keeps you from being able to participate in those programs is high enough that there's a ton of people that are now stuck in this gray area of my housing costs are too high, but I make too much income to have the programs, And so you have, so now then, so each time we ask these questions, the responses seem to be geared toward what can we do to make it easier for people to move into Evanston? I'm saying we also need to say what we're asking is, what do we need to make sure is part of the plan to not get people squeezed out of the existing? You say, let's say we're talking about aging in place. Your scenario that you just gave was, if I want to be a senior who's going to age in place, you're actually going to force me to move. You're
Not
gonna,
all
you're,
cases, that's
you
an
know,
option.
the aging in place means just that, aging in place, being able to stay in the
So-
home.
so-
And then for.
I don't
In-
think
in that- in that-
I know.
In that scenario,
There should be, yeah,
in that scenario, I think like the one-stop shop, like, because I think the energy burden, that's an interesting one and an interesting gap you see. But yeah, I think that would help more people. I think also, you know, if we have an increase, like when we have these bigger developments downtown, that adds to our tax base, so that distributes the tax burden among more people. So, yeah, and so that's another way to ease the burden on folks that are, you know, living here.
And there are things like, let's say, there are housing foundations that make housing, existing housing, someplace where a senior who has a small impairments can still live. And there are programs for that. So those do exist, but there's no one solution that's going to fix the needs of everybody. So we have to
And-
look at a range.
And the other, and like I say, I've had one pass, like I've had one sit down where like I read the heck out of that report, and then I had another one where I just like skimmed it. Like, I think the one thing that jumped out at me is like, there is a big gap with the people who are above 80% to 120 that are getting squeezed. Like that, I think historically hasn't been the case.
That's true.
And so that's where, you know, these housing pressures are like trickling up. It's not like, you know, it's like, I know people who have like double income, pretty good jobs who like couldn't afford to buy a place here. That's kind of crazy. But, I think historically, like that hasn't been the case.
I
think,
just,
yeah.
to tag on to what you're saying, I think what we've seen, is that senior owns a house, they can't stay there. To renovate while they have a disability or a decline in their health, possible. So let's find a condo, got great condos, but now they're gonna take on a mortgage. And the mortgages at the state with rising and stock, it's all skewed. So they don't leave that house, but then goes to buy, right? And so we're stuck, we're landlocked.
But we might, if we change your zoning, allow cooperative housing. And this is the thing that's big with seniors. There are houses that are being built that have shared space and then maybe 4 bedrooms and bathrooms that are quite private, but they share space. And right now, we don't allow that. And we're unrelated people living together. You know, we don't, our zoning doesn't allow that even technically. It should. These are the types of things, they're very different housing types. You get people who are looking at other types of shared housing. All of these are options that we should be able to think about offering. And when you think about it, most of the least expensive housing forms of the past, like room houses, boarding houses, support occupancy, have been zoned out. And they're ideal for some people. I used to work at the Mobile YMCA, and there were men living there who would never move anyplace else. They loved it there. It was perfect for them. And it was also very fun. So we have to be open-minded to change and to not say the single family housing out right was really post World War II. And I found when we were moving out of the civic center, a, a pamphlet about the housing situation right after we were to. And one of the things that was remarkable was this comparison of Evanston with nearby and the amount of single family homes, the percentage of total housing was totally different. Evanston's always been very different from most of our neighbors, other parts of Chicago. Yeah. Wilmette was 95% single family homes. Evanston at the time was in the 30s. You know, so we're kind of, I always think of it as returning to Evanston's roots because our older parts of town and parts of the 1900s. That this mix of house and this that gives people and there are people who think, oh my God, the investors are going to come and snap up everything, you know, push everything out. There are areas, there are some areas, there are single family homes in our 4, which is a higher density, build apartment buildings, and our 5 that, you know, people are still keeping them single family homes. Changing zoning doesn't mean that we're going to remove the ability to have single family homes for a bunch of people. It means there are options to having just single family homes. And economically integrated society. We're never going to get there. It could be done.
And what work also needs to be done within the banking industry to get them to be.
That's a big one. That's heavy lift.
Because we ran into that problem with something we were trying to do. And it's like, I'm sorry, there's not a comp. And you can't do that. You can't, it was a too. Yeah, anyway, it was,
That is a terrible.
it was, it
Yes.
was really extremely frustrating trying to do something positive with a property that would have made it more units and more affordable, affordable units. And we could not get a mortgage or any bank to look at it because there was not a comp within a mile of us. And so therefore the project fell apart. So there's a lot of work has to be done with lobbying in the banking industry to get also be more flexible with their viewpoints of, oh, we want me to be able to write a mortgage for 4 individuals who are not related to each other. Yes, we do. That is what we want you to do. That's a hard nut to crack, but it has to be dealt with as part of this plan. Otherwise, we can come up with a lot of ideas that are really wonderful and then have the banking industry just shut it down. Because there's no lending available.
That is that. All of these things have to be looked at, and there are some things we won't. We may think it's ideal, but be able to implement right away, and that's going to keep legislative changes at the state level and pushing various industries. But we can't control everything. We've got to start with what we can do.
But it definitely needs to be part and parcel of this assessment
Well,
process.
and there are.
Because if the lending industry is not going to be cooperative with them, kind of beat their head against a wall. So I would say
there
it
are
needs to
some
be taken
things,
into consideration. Yes, that somebody needs to be looking at that angle.
Well, financing, whatever we're doing is always a challenge.
Yes.
Yes.
Is anyone working on trying to get a supportive housing license for the state?
A slip.
Because that
14
takes a-
years.
I mean, it takes a long time, and
The last time I checked, they were not giving out more.
that was like the 10
Right.
years ago. But
That
Deerfield's
was for a
going
long
on.
time.
Deerfield's going on. I just heard.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
But some of them are ones that have held for a long
I
time.
know.
The challenge is
Yeah.
the state uses Medicaid to fund those. And so that's a state issue. We will continue to do.
So I feel like we're not going to build any
Because that
housing like that without
assisted living for
that
people.
partnership.
Or assisted living.
And that's lobbying.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, and that's what we identified back. We're trying to get, actually,
Things are on a shelf.
Part- but that, you see what I'm saying, that is also where, work of our legislators to change how the
We all
state
stayed up
would
and
direct
right. That's not being,
like,
we're not facing the numbers. Those are real hard questions.
although we do have, in Evanston, we have more, we have a higher percentage of different housing types perceived as our neighbors.
Yeah, but they like,
Like,
they move
Come in
here
from everywhere else.
from Town Park, they move here.
In some cases.
Yeah, and they take our bets, and they take our units.
Well, that's
So-
That's the real estate.
So we have an uphill battle with all this stuff, but we have to keep on chipping away. So, next steps, this is like the first official kind of feedback info session on this. But please fill out those, I'll leave up and we'll be discussing it again in HCDC next two meetings, and then, we'll eventually get to city council, but, yeah, and I think, yeah, it's a lot of work. I always say, like, if there was one magic ordinance or lever we could pull, we just do it. But there's really like a lot, and I think staff has been really smart because I'm like, let's do everything, but we want, but we really need to choose the ones that make the most, it's like,
Yeah.
it would,
Biggest bang.
it wouldn't even be easy if we had unlimited money because we don't have unlimited space, right? So we really want to be, like tactical and like choose the things that have the most impact in the community. And so this is like a really great start. So Director Flax and her staff has been like hard at work at this. You know, Yuri is a rock star for putting this together, and we'll be, you know, we'll keep working on it. So.
And on the City of Evanston website, just in that little search box, just put in housing for all. And you will get to that page without having to remember it. And that will give you all of these written documents to be able to look at and direct right there with to the input. And the input form, we are going to ask you very specific questions, but there's also the ability to put in your previous answer. But one of the reasons we're asking responses to certain things is that it gives us an ability to analyze the data overall more easily than like, this is a narrative. What are they really saying? You know, it makes it very challenging to really decide what that. Okay. Any questions?
All right.
Thank you
Everyone.
so much for
thanks.
being here and for your attention and your questions.